Time might be.
At the grand opening.
It just says
Well, Andy went without me, Daniela.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
They couldn't resist it.
poor gas station across the street.
Empty.
Yeah. Especially because they have diesel.
We're going.
ready.
Sir.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the January 6th workshop meeting for Northwestern Lehigh School District to order at this time. Please join me for opening exercises. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please be seated. Christie, would you please call the roll?
Sure. John Cassiano,
Here.
Willard Deliker,
Here.
Joseph Fatzinger, Todd Hernandez,
Here.
Todd Leiser,
Here.
Rosemary Lister,
Here.
Alan Rex,
Here.
Rachel Scheffler,
Here.
James Warfel.
Here.
You have to use seats.
Let's try Joe Fatzinger again. Mr. Fatzinger, are you with us?
I do not see him on this.
Okay.
He was planning to be on the Zoom.
Okay, thank you. So we need to approve the agenda that we've been sent and have in front of us. And I would, are there any changes you'd like to make this evening?
No, but there is a new agenda item, 4.02, in case you printed the agenda item early, just in case, make sure you have it.
Got that.
That's the only thing.
Okay. So the agenda motion would be as written.
I'll make the motion to approve the agenda as written.
Motion by Mr. Rex,
Second.
second by Mr. Hernandez. Any comments or questions? Hearing none. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. We have an agenda. Welcome once again. At this point in the meeting, we offer courtesy of floor to anyone who is with us that would like to address the board. And we will do the same at the end of the meeting. Dr. Sosnovic, are there any people waiting to address the board?
There are not.
Okay, and we'll move to first item on agenda is the Safe Schools Report. Routine annual report.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Delacour. For your review is our annual recurring item of the Safe Schools Report. This is a mandated report that requires us to report all incidents of violence, weapons, alcohol, drug and tobacco to the Department of Education. Per Mr. Leiser's request last year, I posted in the administrative section for the board a document that compares this year to last year. There's nothing of significance to highlight other than the reduction in numbers are reflective of us not being here basically for the second half of last year. And so the report is for your view, and I'll take any questions if you have any.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Sosnovic. Are there any questions or comments about the report?
Yeah, the 12 arrests, is that 12 separate individuals or is that one individual multiple times?
It can be one individual multiple times. I would have to get the specifics, but it can be one individual multiple times.
Okay, but the total's still 12. It could be
The total,
Yeah.
all the
10
aggregate
individuals and
total of
one
arrests.
twice. Okay.
Correct. If you have one person, have 12 arrests.
Correct.
I'm glad you explained that the reduction in number, because it was really impressive. And I was like, it occurred to me. But still, you were there for 6 months of the year, and it was down by over 50%, which was pretty interesting to see. So maybe you just missed spring fever problems.
Okay, good comments. Anybody else? Before we move on, this does not require action. This is information only. The report is mailed into the state as required. If there are no other comments, we'll move to the next item on the agenda, which is under policy. And we have a first reading for 3 Non-discrimination policies that are in front of us for the next 30 days.
Yes, and I'll take that. And I will take that as well, just to start. So I posted for your review are 3 policies that Mrs. Matika will review. These policies contain updates that reflect changes to Title IX that took place last fall. Mrs. Matika, would you mind just running through the 3 policies briefly?
No problem. Good evening, everyone. On the agenda this evening, you'll see 3 policies. Policy 149, non-discrimination based on sex. Policy 103, non-discrimination, classroom and school practices. And policy 104, non-discrimination for employment practices. As Dr. Sinovic said, back in August, the federal Title IX regulations became effective. There were 2,200 pages to that regulation. It actually changed the definition of sexual harassment and what qualifies as sexual harassment and discrimination. Also, last August, we took a draft policy forward as a placeholder, and our administration team also was participating in Title IX training. As a result of our original draft and additional work, we made additional edits to these policies. And in the future, you'll see about 3 or 4 more policies coming forward that will be edited based on these federal regulation changes. So I do ask for you to review the policies, and we'll bring them forward again for final reading in 30 days.
I will add, Mr. Delacare, there are a number of policies tied to this Title IX update that Ms. Matika just reviewed. There will be additional ones forthcoming next month underneath the same auspice that we need to get them up to speed with the latest compliance.
Okay, are there any comments or questions about the on this first reading? I did have one question on the draft 140, the draft 149 under the definitions for consent. Is that whole entire definition there a state required definition?
Yes, this has been reviewed legally, yes.
Okay, the only thing that caught my eye is the last part of the paragraph when it talks about children under the age of 18 cannot consent, and then it has to talk about children between 13 and 15, and the person has to be 4 more years older than them. I didn't know why that was necessary, but why can't we just say 16, and below that there is no consent? If it's a legal definition, I guess we don't have a whole lot to say about it.
Yeah, it was pulled out by the legal department and specifically written that way. I can follow up if you'd like more information, Mr. Delacare.
Fine. This is the way it's got to be legally, then we can't make our policies more or less than the legal requirements, which is a question I had.
Yeah, Mr. Delacare, if I could add, it's a substantial change to Title IX that took place, something that's been legally battled for a number of years and finally pushed forward and come to light in terms of instituting this August. So you'll find throughout these policies a number of definition changes that have taken place as a result of legal advice as well as the legislation that pushed this forward.
Thank you, Doc. It just seems like we're opening it up for making it easier. That's my personal opinion. Thank you for your comments and questions. Anybody else before we move on? Seeing none, next item on the agenda is under operations, talking about the ERATE bid process for Cat 2 equipment.
Yep, I'll take this one too. So similar to last year, we're requesting your approval to apply for Category 2 ERATE funding for the 2021 funding year. ERATE is a federally run program that provides schools and libraries reimbursement for internet service in addition to the equipment that transports that service. Just for your information, funding year 2021 starts the new 5-year E-rate cycle, whereby we'll be eligible as a district up to $350,000 worth of reimbursements to take advantage of it. Those reimbursements come to us at a discount rate of 50%. So if we would go out, let's say, and try to purchase something eligible under category 2, like a switch, we would get 50% reimbursement, but we have to follow the process in order for us to do so. If we get it out of cycle, we'd incur that entire cost. So we're asking for your consideration to allow us to move forward and take advantage of these monies available.
Okay, this item will be, you'll take action on this at the next meeting on the 20th. Is there any discussion about the E-rate bid?
Just a clarifying question. There's no obligation to necessarily follow this process if you buy something outside of it. You do that.
Absolutely.
Got it.
We would just have to eat
Eat the
100%.
cost.
The motivation to use E-rate like we're doing is because we all pay a fee on our phone bills to support this E-rate program. So by not going through this process, we're not taking advantage of being able to use the money we pay on these taxes. So thank you for staying on top of this. Any other comments or questions? Thank you. Next item, 4.02, the new item that was just added is the PTA Data Agreement.
Yeah, so in line with what I just mentioned before, we actually worked with the IU to take part of a consortium to get internet services. So everybody needs an internet throughout the county in terms of the public schools. So what the IU does is work on our behalf to aggregate all of those internet services into one single RFP to get competitive pricing. So because the new E-rate cycle has now come upon us, they need to they already did. They had reissued the RFP on our behalf for what our service needs and other school district service needs would be for the next 5 years. And as a result, this is the RFP, actual cost to the district for the transport from us to Weisenberg as well as us to the IU, in addition to the internet services, which would be 10 gig moving forward.
And when is this effective?
This will go into effect for funding year 2021, so it'll start when the next E-rate cycle comes out.
So this is $2,500 a month for 5 years.
151,000.
Yes.
What's the transport? I'm missing you say transport. I'm talking about this.
Yeah, it actually is a physical transport. So the actual line, the fiber physical line. So you have virtual connections between the schools and what they call their POPs, the different data centers that it goes through. And so this is for the whole piece, the fiber connections between us and the IU, and then us, the Weisenberg, so we can make our own private network. And then you have to subscribe to a level of service, whether it be 1 gig internet or 10. But if you remember, we upgraded our internet to 10 gig prior to the start of school, so we could have the capacity to offer online classes and stuff like that. So it's really no more or greater internet than what we're already subscribed to. This is just rolling us into the next 5 years and taking advantage of the consortium pricing without having to go out and bid on our own and complete the E-rate cycle.
And replaces an already budgeted previous expense in your budget.
Correct.
So do some of these items qualify for the E-rate category 2?
This is actually would be considered category 1.
So none of this would
Yes,
qualify?
all of this qualifies for a reambrsment.
Oh, it does? Oh,
Category 1 is
Yeah,
just a different.
we will get
percentage.
reimbursement up to 50% on all of this.
Okay, good.
It doesn't look like they include it's hard to envision 5 years of how much data we're going to 5 years from now. It doesn't look like they include any kind of option to upgrade or to pricing tiers if you were to say, hey, I need 20 gig? You'd be going back and breaking this agreement or looking for more, or what would
We would do something similar to what we did in earlier, but I can tell you right now that we will not ever probably exceed a 20 gig connection. Yeah, no, well, in 5 years, I don't know, with Moore's Law and everything else going on. But yeah, I highly doubt that we will ever exceed a 10 gig threshold within the next 5 years. But the capacity, the option to do so is there, but it would be outside of this.
Okay, good questions. Are there any other comments or questions about the this PTA Data Agreement? And this we'll take action on January 20th as well. And we'll move to the next item on the agenda, and that would be under district finances. Mrs. Frisbee, the budget update. Where we stand there. Right.
Hello, good evening, everybody. Happy New Year. So we have a brief budget update for you this evening. We've talked a little bit about budget back in the fall in October and November. So this is going to just give an update, give you some updated assumptions and numbers that we've worked that have changed a little bit since our last discussion back in November, and then give you the sample resolution not to stay within the index, which we are proposing for board action on the 20th. Chris, if you want to advance those slides for me, please. So tonight we're going to briefly just go through these. I have a couple slides for you to give you a little refresher of some of those numbers and the budget timeline for this 21-22 budget cycle as we are kind of in the midst of it moving forward. So as we start all of our presentations and all of our budget planning, we always focus on what are our budget goals. So back in the fall, the board discussed these goals, and we made some tweaks to our existing 2021 goals. And so these are the 8 goals that we have defined as our budget goals for 21-22. So as we move through the budget process, we're certainly going to come back to these goals and make sure that, you know, the budgetary changes that we're making, are they fitting and are they aligning with the budget goals and really what we set out as our plan for the 21-22 school year. Next slide, Christy, please. So this is the 21-22 budget summary. At this point in time, you'll see the gray shaded category in the middle are the budget numbers as of January. You'll see we have not made significant changes at this point in time to salaries and benefits, some of the major categories. As we start knowing more about staffing, as we start refining our numbers, that's when we'll start refining those numbers, and you'll see some of those changing as we get further into the budget season. So right now we are looking at, without any kind of millage increase and any additional budget cuts at this point in time, a shortfall before any use of fund balance of a little over 3.7 million. As we'll talk about a little bit more in the upcoming slide, the proposed millage increase, which is the 3% Act 1 index, which is allowed for next year, would generate approximately $855,000 of new real estate tax dollars, which would give us a revised shortfall of 2.8, little less than $2.9 million. So as you can see, the changes that we're anticipating right now from the current 2021 school year, you can see some of the changes in both buildings and departments. We're through almost all of those budget meetings at this point in time, so we do anticipate some additional changes there, but we've really done our best to try to refine and look at those categories and say, you know, what do we really need moving into next year, and where can we tighten up and make some cuts. The salaries and benefits, again, this is just a carryover of what you saw back in October and November. We'll start identifying more specifically positions as we work into, you know, February, March, and April. And then district-wide and grants, you'll see a significant increase in that category, which we'll talk about a little bit later in the 2 slides coming up. Some of the driving factors of why we're seeing increases specifically in those categories. Our total revenue at this point in time, we are anticipating a decrease of about $78,000. I have not updated revenue assumptions from what we saw back in October and November. I'm hoping to have some updates for you in February, maybe March, as we have a better understanding of how much real estate collection we're going to turn over to Berkheimer, as well as hopefully some more information about the new CARES money and how that impacts the 21-22 the federal dollars for next year's budget, as well as any potential plans for state subsidy and where we project seeing that moving forward. So we're hopeful to see some increases in some of those areas, but as of right now, these are the same numbers that you saw back in the fall. So advance the slide, please. So the Act 1 index, which is really the first major part of our budget planning process, is dictated by PDE. We do January as a pivotal time. We have to either adopt a preliminary budget, identifying that we need to exceed the index and apply for Act 1 exceptions, or the board needs to adopt a resolution saying they will stay within the Act 1 index for the 21-22 school year. As we discussed back in November, the base index for us, as well as the adjusted, because we no longer receive an adjusted index, is 3%, which equates to about 0.5166 mils and $855,000. So the impact of if we would raise taxes to the maximum index to the average taxpayer, and again, that average taxpayer in our district for residential properties, about $220,000 on assessed value, would be an impact or an increase to their taxes of $113. The note at the bottom, you'll see this is the maximum allowable tax increase. Doesn't mean that's the tax increase that the board will adopt in June, but it basically, by adopting that resolution, you're stating you will not exceed that index. So as you'll see as we move further into the slides, at this point in time, the recommendation is to adopt that resolution in 2 weeks. One, because we think we can bring you a budget by June that we can live within that 3%. But additionally, we don't believe there's any allowable Act 1 exceptions that would make it worth our while to approve, delay that process, and adopt a preliminary budget right now. So kind of twofold, which is what we anticipated. We anticipated that last year, if you remember, for the board members who were here, we had the special ed exception, which we did take advantage of a piece of that. And we thought that that was going to potentially be a one-year thing that was available to us. And by, the official forms are not out, but based off of preliminary forms in last year's, we do not qualify for any exceptions for next year. Advance the slide, Christy. So this slide, early look 21-22, we saw this slide, kind of that middle column back in November, some of the significant increases we were anticipating for 21-22 compared to our current budget. As you can see, I've updated some of those amounts. We didn't make a ton of changes. Again, nothing to salaries and benefits other than PSERS has now certified the employer contribution rate, which is 0.01 less than what we had projected back in the fall. So we see about a $2,000 difference in cost there. The most significant change, though, from November to now is in our cyber charter tuition line item. You'll see preliminarily we were anticipating an increase of about 185. Based off of student enrollment, based off of some projections of what we see in terms of online learning and accounting for potential students that would move to the cyber model, we are anticipating needing about $435,000 of an increase compared to our current funding. Special ed, again, we've maintained that. We have met with special ed director, looked through some of those IU placements, some out of district placements, and we think that our increase of 100,000 should accommodate the actual placements for next year. So in total, we never like to go up, but unfortunately, we believe that it's prudent for us to make some adjustments to those cyber charter tuition line item because of the enrollments that we're seeing. And so the total increase of just those categories within our budget is 1.7, almost $1.8 million. And so again, the millage equivalent of that increase is 1.07 mils. However, our Act 1 index limitation is 0.5166. So you can see our ability to raise taxes does not match just these specific categories of projected increase moving into next year.
Leslie,
Yes.
before you move on from this slide, could you go back to that line for cyber charter tuition for 430? Do you have any further breakdown of what's causing that to go up?
Yeah, primarily what's causing that to go up is student enrollment. So back from when we had projected in November, so that would have most likely been our October numbers. We just have more students who are attending those cyber charter schools. Now, it can be a timing issue of, we didn't realize those students were attending those schools and because the billing wasn't caught up yet. And so, the numbers that we're using for these January are based off of our December enrollment. And unfortunately, we just have more kids there. So it's not that the tuition rate is changing compared to what we had thought in November. It's truly being driven by the number of kids who are currently attending, as well as us accounting for potentially a few more attending in the fall. And so that's one of the other things that, we have a little less than 400 kids who are currently in our online program. And so through the district. And so, the discussions that we're having internally is, what does that look like next year? If we go back to being full-time in school, will all of those kids come back to school, or will some of those kids look and would like to continue an online model? And so certainly the scariest thing to talk about is if all 400 of those kids go to a cyber program. So, that's significant dollars for us. So we, at this point in time, it's too early to say what's going to happen and, what does next year look like? And do we get all those kids back? So we know that's like a big unknown as we move into the budget cycle through June to try to account for and say, how are we going to budget? How are we going to project how many of those kids potentially stay in a cyber environment and either stay in a cyber environment with the district or move to an online cyber school, which obviously affects this particular line item in the budget. I don't know if that answered your question, Bill.
Do you know what approximately what percentage of that 435 is enrolled in our own cyber program here at Northwestern?
None of that would be enrolled in our own cyber program, our digital academy. So that's accounting for all students who would leave Northwestern and attend either a brick and mortar or a cyber program.
Okay.
Yeah. And again, I think right now, we're not building in, we think all those kids are going to go. We're hoping that only a couple will go and we'll get most of those kids back. But if we get to May or June and we see that we think half of those kids or 25% of those kids decide they're going to leave Northwestern and attend a cyber school, we're going to have to talk about how do we budgetarily plan for that and what do we do for 2021 to accommodate that. So those are all things we're working on internally. Again, it's like get the crystal ball out and try to figure out what does school look like come the fall. And so we don't want to budget a significant increase to this line item because we don't know at this point in time. So we don't want to artificially inflate the budget and assume half of those kids are going to go and increase that line item by millions of dollars. But at the same time, we also want to realize that it's a possibility to lose some of those kids. And we don't want to be in a position where now, we're $1 million short in that line item because we didn't plan on that. So it's still early and we'll certainly keep an eye on that. But that I suspect will be a line item as we move to June. That continues to fluctuate and change as we get a better handle on, what we think will be our cyber and charter enrollment for next year.
Yeah, when Leslie and I sat down and looked at the number of students that are on the enrollment report already, we were at budget or over budget, the number of students currently enrolled. And then we looked at the numbers, and currently I have it in front of me. We have currently 373 students who are online only with a Northwestern teacher. That doesn't include cyber, that doesn't include digital academy. So if you remember at the beginning of this year, we offered the opportunity to have online 100% with a Northwestern teacher. Coming towards the end of the school year, we will do a survey and ask questions like how many of you intend if the Northwestern High School District doesn't offer an online option in 21-22. I'm just not sure those families at this point, with the uncertainty with the virus and the vaccination and the safety, are going to be able to anticipate whether or not they'll be able to return or not. And so when you look at 373 students who have chosen that as their option, when we offer a survey that says, will you return to Northwestern? Are you interested in hearing about other digital options that might be available? And we might be able to ascertain that. I just think that's too early of the uncertainty with the virus, which is primarily the reason why people chose. They don't want to have their children. Now, some of that is children who have health-related issues, but some of that is also people who live with someone who has health-related issues. So you have to remember, even as there are lots of news articles about the vaccination rolling out, not going to be offered right now or tested on, has not been tested and will not be offered to children. So if it's a child, an issue with a child who's concerned about getting the virus from somebody else, that concern might or might not be alleviated next year. If it's a person who has a person who lives with them, who might be on the vaccination list, that concern might be eliminated and they might be comfortable even as early as later in the school year, returning to Northwestern and returning to an in-person model. We just think it's naive to think that all 373, we also recognize there are some families who like the truly cyber model, and we have a few kids that we think might remain in that model, either through us or through someone else, and we hope it's through us, and we'll certainly try to do that when we do our survey at the end of the year. But that's where the additional dollars, but none of those kids are Digital Academy students. In the number that Leslie has, I mean, we have currently in Digital Academy 38 students. So in comparison, the majority of our families are choosing Northwestern teacher. I think some of that has to do with the live instruction. So there is some very limited options through other providers, I will call them, that offer live instruction. And so you remember when we talk about what our staff have done and what the expectations of how we built our model, it was very different than what other school districts have done. And we have required and expected, and I think our students have been the beneficiary of, not to say that it hasn't been extremely difficult for our staff, but the live instruction that our staff are doing is very different than what other school districts are doing, and it's very different than what a cyber, an exterior cyber provider will be able to provide. And so, was that the question you're going to ask? How many Digital Academy? 38 is the one that answered your question?
You partially answered my question because you gave us the numbers 373 and then 38. So that's roughly 10% are choosing to go towards a model that we ultimately out of pocket end up having to incur significant incremental costs to support, right? It leaves our district and ultimately goes into that program. I guess my question relates to the number you're showing here, because if I do the math on 373, and worst case scenario, they all choose to just leave us and go Digital Academy elsewhere, it's a $6 million problem.
Yeah, so Leslie will pull the exact number. If you look at our cyber.
Yes, Todd.
Yeah, I know. I mean, at one point I said,
so what did you assume? My question,
we assumed, and Leslie, correct me if I'm wrong, we assumed all of our currently enrolled students and 20 students that are currently enrolled in the Northwestern Lehigh Online would move.
Okay.
Now, that could be moved to our Digital Academy, which is our hope,
right.
or it could move to cyber, which I think was a low assumption that only 20 of 378 will go. But we're obviously going to put some things in place to hope that doesn't happen. But Todd, originally, if you look at our enrollment report, we had 115 students. This is cyber charter combined. 115 students in September and 131 students. So I mean, just astronomical numbers. We did see 15 kids move, but 15 kids is still $1. So Leslie, I'm correct, right? You assumed every kid we currently have enrolled would stay in a cyber next year cyber charter, and we assumed 20 of ours would leave.
Yeah, so the increase that you see there, 435 in that January column, represents the difference between the 115, which we saw back in October and November, to the 130 that we're seeing today that are actually enrolled in schools. And then we have about a $250,000 I'm going to say a reserve built in there for students out of that 373 who are being taught online by our teachers, to assume some of them may go to a cyber program next year. Again, it's not, it's less than 20 kids. So, but we didn't want to be too aggressive because, you look at, okay, do you take 10% of that? Well, 10% of that 373 is 37 kids, and that's over $500,000. So until we have more definitive information, I don't want to inflate that budget number and really inflate the overall shortfall and the budget doom and gloom until we have some concrete information.
The only thing I would add then Leslie, is I think this is a broader conversation as a board topic, is think about the potential liability here of $5.5 to $6 million that has the potential to leave this district, right? As revenue that walks away, that puts us in a massive hole. Two things, right? One is kudos to the team for saving $5.5 million essentially this year by instituting what we did, right? Second is we have to make sure, I think you said this, but we need to support as a board the initiatives that you guys need in order to retain those 373 kids back to the school, right? So if there's additional funding, if there's additional things we need to do to save $5.5 million from leaving, we should support you in that effort because that's a significant, if you said, hey, it's gonna cost $200,000, I need this, this, and this, like, we should support that because
The other
it's
side.
5.5 million that's at risk. So I just wanna frame that, doesn't always come across other than, I think what Bill's picking up on is money keeps leaving here, and that's a potential risk I think that you guys are calling out.
And we have a couple things I would tell you in the investigative stage. Some of that is dependent upon grade levels of the students. And some of that is dependent upon, I'm going to call it the appeal or what needs you're trying to meet. So like the live instruction is something that I believe, without doing any formal surveying, is the appealing part. And that is, I think, evidenced by the difference between choosing the Northwestern teacher and the digital academy. I also think the connection to Northwestern is a piece of it. Like, I don't know that digital academy necessarily has that same feeling of connection. So I think, there are people who certainly didn't want to leave Northwestern, but yet weren't quite comfortable sending their student here for health concerns or, due to the current options. But, you look at our breakdown of those particular students. We have 35, this is online with a Northwestern teacher only. We have 70 students at Northwestern Elementary, 60 students at Weisenberg, 87 students at the middle school, and 156 at the high school. And so of that 373, that should add up to 373, the combination there, you have to target, I would say, when you have some information about the population, the kids, and what need are you trying to meet. I mean, this year we were very creative with online teachers at the elementary school, but we didn't do that by adding staff. We diverted staff that we already had. So I would tell you that probably the model we have is not something that we could continue in the long term, but it might mean creative staffing to be able to offer some of the same things should that continue to be a need. If it's true, like I said, if it's truly a need of, somebody lives in our household and now they're vaccinated and that's not a need anymore, then I think you have to consider that, or it's a health need of the child. I just don't know that we're so early in the vaccination process that they could even answer the question, would they be comfortable sending their student back here next year if the online option with a Northwestern teacher was no longer available. I don't know what the beginning of next year is going to look like, but I would tell you we have lots of investigations going in terms of what we will eventually bring to you as a proposal. We also have some potential CARES dollars that could use if it is a time limited. You don't want to use it for staffing that's going to be a continuous offering, but if it would be something you had to get over a hump that you could do, there are certainly some CARES dollars that we could try to match up the funding with our request as well. If that makes any sense. I don't know if you have anything to add to that. You and I
Got it.
certainly conversation about it.
Only thing you just get kind of add, I think you see such a large number online because they're getting the best of both worlds right now. They're getting a true in-classroom experience every day, especially when you look at a high school level with the amount of synchronous instruction that has taken place. You still have the ability to do many breakouts to work with kids in small groups. I mean, it's really truly as close as you're going to get to an in-person experience. Now, what we need to do is think creatively how we could, if we have to, continue this moving forward. And like Jen said, we kind of robbed Peter to pay Paul in terms of staffing to make it work at different levels, especially at the elementary level where we move a lot of staffing around, especially out of some of our support structures like our MTSS and stuff like that, in order for us to make sure that we had online teachers that are focused on those kids. But that's what we're working on now. We'll come forward with you, but we appreciate the words, Todd.
And what you said, if you're thinking about the marketing and the branding of this too, right? It's almost getting out of the practical realities you highlighted is we're heading into a mode here where we have to think as marketers or as branders, right? If we're trying to retain these dollars in the district, how do we sell that story to those families that are considering leaving, the public school and going into a cyber charter academy? It's significant dollars. We see it. We know we're at 2.5 million now, 5.5 million at risk. You're talking about substantial dollars that it's worth thinking about how do you how do you market that? How do you package that? How do you sell that story to that family of this is why you want to choose our option and not their option? Because the other guys are out there marketing that, right?
Yeah.
So we have to think about, do we have the budget and resources to support that marketing campaign?
And then on top of it, have the same attempt to find out why students left to bring them back.
Right.
For the same marketing campaign, I would call it, to be able to say, and we have some thought theories about what we can do for early education and before they make that choice. Because I've made comments before that sometimes when people make the choice, then they have friends and they don't want to come back. And so we have some thought processes about how we can get in front of some of that so that we can either bring students back and or have them not ever go to begin with. But yes, we recognize that. I would tell you, we have been intuitively aware, we get surveys, Leslie and I get surveys regularly, asking state of the district, state of the budget, lots and lots of district loss. And Leslie can talk to this better than I can. Massive amounts of money to cyber schools. Massive. We did not. My concern now is how do you make sure when you make tweaks or changes or even remove it, that we're not on the backside of that. So we don't have that same massive loss that districts saw on the front side of mass exodus because they didn't have live instruction and they didn't want this. They were going to go to a cyber provider that knows how to do this, which I'm not sure is an accurate statement because I think we're doing it better than all of them. How do we make sure that when this tweaks or this happens and the pandemic is no longer the impetus for why it's in existence or what's in existence, that we don't have the mass exodus on the backside?
Mm-hmm.
Refresh my memory on the tuition for the cyber and brick and mortar charter. Is it the same?
It's the same, but it's different for regular ed and special ed. So it's about $15,000 for a regular ed, regardless of cyber or charter, and it's $30,000. Leslie probably knows their round numbers. $30,000 if they are special education, regardless of cyber or charter. So the number is different by regular ed, special ed. It is not different by cyber or charter, which has always been part of our advocacy, I will call it, about cyber in terms of what it actually costs to educate. We have our own cyber program. They don't certainly, I think, arguably have any of the overhead buildings, any of those things, but yet you pay them the same, well, we do the transportation for the charters, for most of them. And they still receive the same amount of money, and the amount of money is calculated based on how much it costs us to educate a kid, student, child, not how much it costs them. So like our advocacy several years ago with Gary and I look at Alan because Alan and Bill sat in, was we're not saying we don't want them to exist, of any of the organizations, nor are we afraid of the competition. This is the prime example. Like we're competing with them now and we're doing a fantastic job. We want to, however, pay them what it costs them to educate a child. I don't know how you argue at the point that you want to pay a school what it costs to educate a kid, not what it costs us to educate. And then when you offer your own cyber option, even prior to this year, how we still just send money to a cyber school, several of them actually.
And I think we're very competitive as far as results are concerned on the education side, but to Todd's point, the marketing, we're not even touching that. We're not even come close to what the private schools and charters are doing to advertise as free education, come to our cyber school. That's a good point. I think we ought to take a look at that. Again, that's been on the radar for a while, and I think it's getting to a point where we can't sustain ourselves.
That has broader taxpayer benefit.
Yeah.
If we build a marketing campaign to sell the value of the providing, which we all believe is happening. It is happening. We're helping the taxpayers, property values, etc.
I'm sorry, Leslie, we kind of got off track of your presentation here, but I think it was a good discussion. So other questions, let's keep going.
Okay. So to continue on, talking about what are we going to do and what is the plan moving forward. So here's really, how are we going to close that gap? What's going to occur now with these budgetary numbers from now until you see a final budget adoption in June? And so, the biggest area is going to be in staffing and benefits. So we'll start to specifically identify positions. We'll go through the budget and make adjustments for, if we had a replacement built into the budget for 2021, who is that actual staff member? What is their actual salary? What are the associated healthcare and associated benefits? So we'll make some of those adjustments. We'll look at attritional savings or replacement savings for any potential leaves or retirements. And so at this stage, the numbers I did not update from the fall because we don't have any concrete information on a lot of those things right now. So we'll start working on that and make some of those adjustments and changes as we get closer to that March and April timeframe. We'll take a look at substitutes. We'll take a look at overtime, kind of all those areas that we've looked at and pinpointed in prior years to really look at the trending. Obviously, knowing this year is an anomaly and trying to factor in, how does this year compare to what we think next year potentially might look like in some of those categories. So we'll really refine in on some of those categories to try to nail down a good budget number. As I said, potential savings on retirements, resignations, any potential furloughs. Right now, we have bid pricing built into the budget for heating oil and diesel based off of $2.50 a gallon in each of those categories. We are experiencing significantly lower rates right now through our contracts. And so as we get closer to the end of the year and we have a better idea of what our bid pricing looks like moving into next year, that's always an area that we can look to realize some savings if we would lock into some firm pricing. We would continue to evaluate our capital reserve transfers and equipment replacements. This is something that we do annually. We're in the process of updating and looking at the projects on the facilities master plan, making some adjustments, looking at shifting some things, because obviously within this last year, projects that were on that list have either been delayed or put on hold as a result of the pandemic and everything else going on. So that's something that we'll take a look at, bring you potential options, give you some numbers, but then also talk about, if we do that and make that adjustment in this budget, what does that impact and what does that look like then 3-5 years out? So again, one of our focuses through this budget process is not only making this year work, but what's the impact long-term to the decisions we're going to make in the budget today. Reductions to building and apartment budgets. You saw from that slide, we're initially through some of that process. We'll continue working on that. As we all know, that's a very small percentage of our overall budget, but certainly the one that we have sometimes the most control over as supervisors and administrators. And then our planned use of fund balance. So we know we target at least about 1.6, somewhere around there, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less to use a fund balance to help balance the budget based off of the budgeting strategies that we've implemented. As we move into next month, we'll talk about those budgeting strategies, talk about some of the changes or potential changes that we'd like to maybe make in those strategies and the impact that would have to this budget process. The other thing that will help us close the gap as we move into next year, which I didn't include on here, are revenue assumptions. So I'm hopeful that we can bump up some of those revenue assumptions, restore some of those revenue streams that we may be really pulled back on for this current budget year. And then the other unknown, well, I guess known at this point, is what additional federal funding or state funding are we looking to receive? So we did receive preliminary allocations of the next round of that federal stimulus money. And so based off of, and it's not finalized, but the numbers that we received from PDE earlier this week, we are anticipating about $576,000 of a new allocation of CARES money. And so right now that money, the guidelines are not finalized and we haven't received, but from what we understand, that money will be available for us to use through September of 2023. So when we talk about the lingering effects of the pandemic and COVID-related costs as we go out the next couple budget seasons, that funding will certainly be folded into our discussions as to, what are one-time expenses that we can maybe use some of these funds for if they meet their guidelines and the requirements for use, but to help us, smooth in some of those either additional costs or additional things that we think we would not normally have an environment that we were fully online and kind of back to normal, or not online, but fully in class and back to normal versus, extending some of those things into next year or even further possibly. So that will be something that certainly will have a huge impact, and we'll bring some of that back and talk to the board. We have some preliminary ideas of what we'd like to look at some of that for, but we have to sit down and put our heads together and try to map out the next couple of years and what's going to be the most beneficial use and what will help us budgetarily maximize those dollars as much as we can. Next slide, Christy. And so then the recommendation at this point, which I mentioned before, is for the board to adopt the resolution to stay within the Act 1 index. That resolution would be adopted on January 20th. We then have to send that into the state and basically certify that that's what we will live within. The next then mandated timeline would be for May, proposed final budget adoption, and then our final budget adoption in June. And then everything in between would just be the budget discussions, talking about budgeting strategies, and working our way through that budget process like we have done in similar years. And then this is just the timeline that really outlines just where we've come starting in September, some of the things that are on the plate and on our list as we move through this budget season. And so you'll see outlined in red are the items that would be action items at different board meetings, and then all the other meetings and presentations kind of filtered in between along the way. Any questions?
Any questions before we move on? I hear nothing, so thank you, Leslie, for this, for the update you made here, and we'll stand by, see what happens. I think the next thing, so we will take action in 2 weeks for the Act 1 resolution, but other than that, we just keep pressing on.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you, Leslie. So next item on the agenda, which we will also take action on in 2 weeks, is the compensation for our tax collectors.
Yep, and this is a routine item that we see every 4 years. We are mandated through state process and timeline to basically board approve and certify what our tax collector compensation will look like. And so we're required to do that by February 15th so that anyone who potentially would want to run for tax collector would have the ability and understanding to know during the course of their term what the compensation structure would look like. So what we did was Christy and I met with the 4 tax collectors, which we talk to them routinely individually, but kind of once a year, maybe not even that frequently, get to talk to them all together in one group. So we brought them in and we talked to them about, certainly what this year, the challenges that it's brought, what they have seen. I think they would all express that, this has been a very difficult year in terms of tax collection and just, the pandemic stress that has caused and put on people. So we talked through some of those challenges. We talked through, what does compensation structure look like at other school districts within the IU as well as within Lehigh County. Unfortunately, there's no standardized system. So when you look to compare, there's not a really great comparison point. So we talked about, where have we been in terms of increases and what are we looking to propose? So what I have before you here is the proposal that we are recommending for tax collector compensation for the next 4 years, starting January 22 through December of 25, which would essentially be the term of the new round of tax collectors. Jeff Strauss, who is our tax collector at Weisenberg, he, I think, was hoping to be here tonight. I don't know if he's on the line or not to talk, but I know he wanted to, if he was available to be here this evening, was going to talk on behalf of the tax collectors. I have to say, we've worked with these. Mary Metzger is probably the newest tax collector and has been here several years. I think the district has a really good working relationship with our tax collectors. They're reliable. We feel they're very trustworthy. We know that, if they're calling us with a problem, they've vetted and they've worked through that problem with the taxpayer. And now, we need to step in and we need to assist them. And so, we're very fortunate to have collectors that take their job seriously and care about the district and care about the taxpayers. And so, my hope is that all 4 decide to run again for the next term, which would obviously be a smooth, seamless transition for us working with them. So to look at the compensation statement structure that we've proposed, again, a combination of kind of what I've looked at and what I've seen across the board with the other schools in the county, as well as some input from our 4 tax collectors. So they are requesting that we would increase the base compensation for 21 or for the 2022 fiscal or calendar year rather, and then freeze that tuition or freeze that compensation for the next 4 years. Currently, the base compensation is $3,003. They're requesting it to be increased to $3,100 and again, then be frozen over those 4 years. In addition, then we are looking at proposing an increase to the rate per bill tax collection rate. So currently they're receiving $2.22 for every bill collected. The increase would be $2.29 in 22, increasing to $2.36 in 23, $2.43, and then at the end of the agreement, $2.50 per bill. So, what does that equate to in terms of total dollars? So in total, across all 4 tax collectors, for the 2022 school year, that would be about $1,000 increase. And then less about $500 every year after that. And again, that's total across all 4 collectors, not individually. And so I think, we looked at, what is fair, what are their duties, what challenges have they experienced that maybe were different than 5, even 10 years ago. And, I think every one of them will tell you the job seems to get harder. People become more needy. People have bigger concerns. They have more problems that they're dealing with the mortgage companies and reconciling bills and things like that, which seems crazy this day and age, but it's believable because we've worked through some of those problems with them over the years. I don't know, is Jeff on or is he not on?
Nobody with us?
There's nobody on, I don't believe, Leslie.
Okay.
Leslie, who covers the cost? Like, do they cover the cost of like the billing and all of that, or is that as a separate line?
So that's the district. So the district, we have a contract with Berks County Intermediate Unit. Everybody in Lehigh County, I think except Allentown, utilizes them. So they do our bill printing as well as they do all the mailings for us. So once the board approves the tax bill or the millage rate, we release the file and we release the millage rate to the printer. They then print and mail out everything. And then we pay for the software and the access of that software for our tax collectors. And so we control that. We control what they have access to do in that software. But again, it's very collaborative between Christy Steigerwalt in my office and the tax collectors, really this time of year on a daily basis, sometimes working with them. But yes, we cover the cost of all of that. So the only thing that's not included on this list is we do reimburse them for postage. So if they send reminder notices or tax certifications, they will sometimes submit for reimbursement of stamps.
So this compensation is all labor without any material costs.
Correct. We would provide the materials or reimburse.
So it's roughly a 3%. We're looking at 3%, I believe, in the roughly on the base compensation going into the next 4 years from current, and then it looks like 7 cents a year for the bills.
Yes, so year one, so that 2022 would be about a 3% increase overall. And then after that, by freezing the base compensation, the overall increase is about 1.8.
Yeah, okay.
And again, that's, that was variable based off of the number of bills collected. So if we would have substantial growth, then the number of bills issued would go up, then obviously there'd be increased costs for that collection. But compared to the current cycle, the last 4 years, we certified 7,686 total bills. And you can see as of our 2021 tax duplicate, we have 7,732. So it's a pretty stable total bill net collection number.
It appears reasonable, or to me, are there any objections to bringing this forward in 2 weeks for take action on? Is there any discussion about this? The people that I can see here in the room are all shaking their head no, so.
Okay.
If there are any suggestions or comments, now's the time to do it. Otherwise, we'll ask the staff to bring this back in 2 weeks for action.
Okay, thank you. And I would just like, again, to publicly, thank the 4 tax collectors for their partnership with the district, because, you hear sometimes stories from other districts or tax collector problems that they're having with collections or the software. And, we do not have any of those problems, and they're all willing to work with us and work through issues and, make sure that we're collecting everything that we possibly can.
Yes, I think we're very fortunate in having the people we do have in these 4 townships.
Yes, for sure.
Leslie, is that 2% that goes uncollected, is that on them to chase, or are we using a third-party service to chase that?
Yeah, so right now, it's actually this time of the year, we actually delayed, typically this first week in January is when we would meet with the tax collectors to do basically close out their collection process and then turn over to the delinquent tax collector, which is Portnoy Law Associates. However, because of the delay in the mail, which obviously everybody has experienced at their home, we have pushed that settlement back. So by law, we need to do that settlement by January 15th. So we are going to do all 4 of the settlements next week. We do have 2 collectors that have some outstanding issues that they're trying to work through with, it was sent but not received. And, there's proof that the check was sent for the taxes, but the mail hasn't delivered it yet. So we were trying to hold off as long as we could to make sure that anything post-dated prior or as of December 31st gets counted as current collections, and we only truly turn over what is delinquent effective January 1st. So we'll have a better idea at the end of next week how much we're going to turn over. We just haven't had a chance to meet with our collectors yet this year. And again, that's a little bit different than prior years. By now, by today, I would have probably met with 2 of our collectors, already know, where we've closed out the year with at least 2 of our townships. But, I think Christy heard from several of them, as late as today, I think, with, I received this, it's post dated, kind of, should I include it? Should I deposit it? Should we not? So we're trying to account for everything that we possibly can that was postmarked again prior to the 31st of December. It's just really unfortunate the mail is so slow right now.
Okay, any other questions or comments? And we'll bring this to the board in 2 weeks for action. The next item, I'm not sure what kind of strategy we're going to use to go through this 131-page audit report here. But Leslie, if you have a plan for walking through this, there is no action required on this. It's just information, but you have to go all the way to the end of the report to see that there were no findings, which is the good news.
Yeah.
And everything else looks great.
Yeah, I have no intentions of going through the audit report. I certainly can with any board member who would like to discuss that with me, or any particular schedules or footnotes in there. Not typically something I'll go through in detail at the board level, but I certainly, if that's something the board wants me to do, I certainly can be prepared to do that. Just wanted to, again, get this out to the board. So this is the financial state for the fiscal year ended 6/30 of 20. At this point in time, we have submitted the required annual financial report to PDE, as well as the Federal Clearinghouse, which is our governmental obligation. And then the other component that needs to be completed before December 31st is the reporting to the EMA website, which is our continuing disclosure for debt. So all of that really relates to and involves the audited financial statement. So as Bill mentioned before, a successful audit, a clean audit. If you go to the management letter on page 4, we did have one item that was related to reimbursements for employees. We did transition a new accounts payable clerk back in the fall. We did have a couple of things that weren't double checked. There were some miscalculations, some sales tax that ended up being reimbursed. So that was corrected back in the fall once we that person learned the new rule, and we obviously put a process into place to make sure that we were double checking all of that. So we didn't have any subsequent issues with that, but again, because they found a few employee reimbursements, that there were some things that were either miscalculated or sales tax was reimbursed. That was the reason why that made it into the management letter comment. In terms of the other information for leases, this is just an upcoming GASB statement that we will be required to comply with, which will have a financial statement impact with how leases will be recorded moving forward for things like the copy machine. So we have a 5-year copy machine lease. Right now, we just expense that lease. We'll have to account for it differently in the financial statement moving forward. But that's something that, my team works with Gorman, who is our auditor. And, certainly we stay up on all of that and make sure that anything is incorporated that needs to be into those statements. The one thing that I will be bringing to you subsequent, this was the last year of our agreement with Gorman Associate for services. So I suspect the board would like another proposal from Gorman's team moving forward into, for the 2021 school year, as well as subsequent audits. But that's something certainly up to the board if they would like to request a proposal from Gorman or go out for a proposal for services from other firms. My recommendation would be to solicit a proposal from Gorman and Associates. People have different philosophies as to in terms of auditors. I believe that you're not going to find a tougher audit firm than Gorman and Associates in the area. And I think we get a very fair audit, and I think the board should have confidence that they're working on your behalf and they're keeping us on our toes and making sure we're doing the right thing in the business office.
Okay, thank you, Leslie. So 2 questions are, first, are there any comments or questions about the audit report itself from any board member who would like clarification on anything?
And if anyone is interested in a paper copy, I do have audit books. So it's certainly the exact same thing as the PDF version, but I do have bound books that Gorman's team dropped off.
Leslie, has there been any questions or comments from any community members who might be ex-auditors or ex-board members on this audit?
There have not, no.
Thank you.
Okay. If anyone would like a hard copy and would like to review it, please let Leslie know and she can get that to you. And otherwise, we'll receive this report. There's no action required. And the next question would be, is there any appetite with any board members to solicit bids from other auditors or simply remain with Foreman, asking them for a proposal to continue as our auditor? And I don't hear anybody suggesting that we go out for bid. So we'll, Leslie, we'll just approach Foreman and see if we can extend the services that they offer to us. As long as I can remember, Foreman has been our auditor and we've always been pleased with the results. And I agree with Leslie. My recommendation would be to stay with Foreman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think I mentioned before, Bill Gorman did pass back in the spring. He had transferred ownership to his partner, Bo Travis. And so Bo is now running the firm. We talk about this in the office. We still call them Gorman because, he didn't change the firm name. But I just did want you to know that Bo Travis is now the managing partner and owner of the firm, as Bill did pass away. But Bo has worked with us, though, probably longer than I've been at the district. He's been on our audit. So he's certainly not new to the district.
Has there been a sort of a transitional period, though, from original auditors to who you're dealing with now during the period of time?
So in terms of Bill Gorman, he transitioned ownership of the firm about a year and a half ago. And so he was still on as the consulting partner and he was doing all of the technical reviews. And so although, Bill was still the face of our audit, and he'd come out and we would see him, he really had transitioned the business and was in a consulting role. In terms of Bo, like I said, Bo has been on the audit for longer than I've been here. And then in terms of the audit team itself, there's 3 or 4 guys that are on their staff that have been here probably 10 years. And certainly like any audit firm, there's the new staffers that come in and every year there's like 1 or 2 new people on the team, but a very consistent team that, we've established relationships with over the years. And so, I actually just had an email exchange with them today over the FEMA money and how they wanted me to, code that in the system. And, did we need to allocate a funding source to the expenditures? And so that's also some of the things that I think we benefit from Gorman. They stay up to speed on all of that. And so, a lot of times an auditor will respond and say, do whatever you want. I can say to Bo, here's what I'm thinking, do you agree with this function and funding source, or would you like me to put it somewhere else? And so, I would rather him can't tell me where he wants me to put it, then have a reclass entry when we get to the audit in, next year. And so they've been very helpful over the years in different new applications of things or new accounting pronouncements that we need help, developing the schedules. So it's not just we see them once or twice a year and that's it. We have open communication with them throughout the year on different technical issues that come up.
Okay. I don't hear any other questions, Leslie, so let's move into the next agenda item, which is the psych ed services.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this is a contract for Dr. Sharp Ross to complete bilingual psychoeducational evaluations for our students whose first language is not English. Previously, we collaborated with a bilingual school psychologist from Allentown, but due to the pandemic, school psychs are really short on time, so she's not able to help us right now. Dr. Sharp Ross does come really highly recommended, and we're thankful she's willing to work with us and that she has the time to do so.
I guess that was Andrea, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, you can't see her.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's Andrea, sorry.
Well, thank you. This is a routine item.
It's not necessarily routine. It's routine as far as providing the services for our bilingual students. We haven't had an annual contract on the table for as long as I've been here because we were really contracting with someone else that I believe we already had a contract for. Just because of the pandemic, she's not able to help us right now. So we had to do some searching. And like I said, Dr. Sharp Ross is able to assist us right now, but we would need a new contract for her to help us with those students.
Okay, thank you. So are there any comments or questions from the board regarding this contract that we will take action on in 2 weeks?
So I have a question for Andrea. That's one individual who can conduct the evaluation regardless of the primary language of the student? Is that correct?
She's for Spanish speaking students and English speaking students, so it wouldn't be from multiple languages, but she could conduct the evaluation for any of the children that we would need whose first language would be Spanish, not English.
How often do you have a need for someone other than Spanish speaking?
Since I'm here, we have not had any. We've had at least 3 for Spanish.
Does that include Pennsylvania Dutch?
I'm
done.
I don't think so.
Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, was this vetted then? Did legal go over?
Legal? Yep. Yep.
It's vetted by legal, so we'll see the final document for action in 2 weeks. Yes.
I was just going to make a comment. The Department of Health, Mental Health, and Drug and Alcohol, their website has a new feature now that has a translate button. So any education and resources are available in 100 different languages. You probably already know that, but just in case. It's really helpful. Good information.
Wow.
I appreciate that. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next item on district finances are the reports. Leslie, is there anything you'd like to highlight for some of the reports?
Yeah, if I could just draw your attention on the monthly report recap to the top section regarding local revenues. So as the board is aware, we extended the discount period for tax collection and eliminated penalty. So these collection percentages do look slightly skewed compared to what we're seeing in a normal cycle. This is one of those things that, we don't have the information yet for December. So I'm hopeful that some of those collections were just delayed and we'll see that percentage increase for the month of December. But until we meet with our tax collectors next week, we won't have a definitive amount. So you can see we're ahead in terms of total dollars by about $90,000. However, our collection percentage is down. If you recall back to our spring discussions and our budgeting, this is what we anticipated, and we did account for a reduction of our collection percentage in the budget. So I'm not worried that we're not meeting budgetary targets, but would have hoped that what we thought would happen would not have come true. So again, I'll have more information as we close out the year with our December reports next month, and hopefully, we see a surge of collections in the month of December, as that was the last month of flat to close out the year strong. Other than that, you'll see pretty routine. I would like to just draw your attention to federal revenues. We have started receiving our ESSER, which is the first round of CARES funding that we received back in the fall. We're receiving monthly payments or monthly installments of those CARES dollars. So right now, I think, Leanne and I talked about this before the holiday break. I think we are trying to coordinate and keep everything straight for, I think, 6 different funding streams right now between state and federal funding associated with COVID dollars. So, I will try to outline which specific funding this is relating to. But as we talked about a little bit earlier, we have another round of that CARES funding that will be allocated to us that I'm not sure when we'll start receiving. Hopefully some of it this year, maybe not for several months. In terms of EIT, our collections are still strong. We are trending ahead of where we were last year at this time. But again, Berkheimer is still indicating that they believe overall will be about 10% down compared to our collections from prior year. And on the expenditure side, pretty routine month of spending. That's all I have unless there's any questions.
Any questions for Leslie about the reports? Okay, hearing none. We have one more item under financial, and that's the budget presentations for the LFIC, LCTI, and the IU.
Yep, and this is just a question for the board. Do you have a desire for one or all of those entities to come out to present their budgets to the board, or are you comfortable with either the board appointed board member on those groups, or I can put together a summary of the budgets for each of those organizations, whatever your preference.
I think you do a terrific job, Leslie.
Okay.
I nominate you.
Okay.
So a lot of head nods to the positive for you to do this yourself.
Okay, then once we get all 3 of the final budgets, we'll attach them for February, and I will provide the summary updates for you. Thank you.
Thank you. And moving on into old business, I just asked Mrs. Holman, Jennifer, if you would care to update us on any COVID activity or any staffing issues we've got under old business.
Certainly. I sent an update last night. We are one of 3 Lehigh Valley school districts that returned to in-person learning after the holiday. Many of the Lehigh Valley school districts chose to do an extended holiday break and either returning January 11th or January 19th or 20th after the Martin Luther King holiday. Us, Parkland and Southern Lehigh, have made the choice to return on January 4th after the holiday. Our teachers, as I mentioned earlier, continue to do an amazing job with our students, meeting students' needs in person, online, sometimes both. And so they continue to do an amazing job. We continue to receive lots of compliments in terms of parents who talk to usually coworkers of other school districts. And so I do want to, certainly commend them because it has not been an easy year in terms of managing all of that. We do continue to see a large number, and through the holiday break, we did for employees and students, a large number of students. As you can imagine, we are, I'd have to count the weeks, but many weeks in substantial. We were 9 or 10 before the holiday, so we're probably at 11 or 12 weeks in substantial in Lehigh County now. Troy might know the number of how many weeks consecutively off the top of his head.
I'm laughing because I think they stopped sending us the weekly notices.
We used to get a weekly notice on Monday that would remind us we are in substantial every Monday morning. And you're right, now that you say that, they stopped sending them to us to remind us that we're in substantial every Monday morning. So I don't know, before the holiday, we were 9 or 10 weeks pretty consecutively. The numbers have, we chart them and send them to you regularly. Troy does that every Friday when the numbers are released. The positive and negative of it is, they're certainly high, but it has started to plateau. It'll be interesting to see what happens with the holiday. There are positives, as well, but we did through the holiday as well as, even coming back this week, we continue to have a very large number of students and staff. The positive and the negative of it is, it's not been contacts here and it's not been spread here. That doesn't mean that it doesn't create challenges for us. And, switching students to online is one piece, but staffing's another piece. And so, a bus driver or a large number of teachers who come in contact with something as simple as a spouse or a child that's at daycare or a daycare closure or our 7 surrounding school districts being closed causes immense staffing issues to no fault of their own. And so some of those staff, and I'll just give you like I don't say worst case, but an extended example. Some of our staff, get quarantined because a child comes home from daycare. And so they end up in quarantine for the household exposure, and they do the whole quarantine, and either at the end or subsequently after then they get sick or they happen to get COVID, and now there's a whole other quarantine. And so some of the extended leaves, we've worked with our association as well as our teachers who have just been fantastic. Some of them are zooming in from home if they feel well enough to do so. And so sometimes that's happening, and we've done that to remain operational. And so we really look at it as, it certainly is helpful for our employee, but it's also helpful for our kids. And so we do have some lack of substitutes at this time. It's not the most desirable job for some of our folks to come in and sub right now. And so we do have a number of very loyal subs, but we are short on subs, and there are a number of days that we don't have substitutes to fill all of our open positions. And so we prioritize people who are ill and quarantined and try to shuffle our substitutes in those areas. But sometimes it is coverage and our people on teaching from home and being able to reverse Zoom in, I think I'm calling it. And they've really done that to meet our kids' needs. And so our kids have really been the benefactor of being able to really continue their education through this. I've heard from some of my colleagues and friends in other school districts of where teachers normally are in the curriculum, and our teachers, for the most part, there's certainly exceptions, are doing okay keeping up with the curriculum and the pace, but that really is a testament to the synchronous instruction that they're offering. Staffing could become an issue in January. They expect some of the holiday things to hit second or third week of January, and so that we've run scenarios and plans where if we end up having bus drivers having to do a delay to kind of get kids to school, I can't miraculously produce more bus drivers. We've done some interesting coverage things to get classrooms covered just to try to remain in school. All very creative solutions. Positives of it are, I did put in the notes last night, the HVAC project that you gave permission for the board gave permission for the administration to start. McClure did the majority of over the holiday. As of yesterday, all of our classroom spaces were done with the bipolar ionizers. They didn't do the post-testing. Mr. Rex asked the question earlier of Mr. Oakes. They have done all of the classrooms, and they are continuing to come back and do the rooftop units. So you're looking at like bigger spaces and offices and gymnasiums is what would be a rooftop units. But he said all the classrooms are done and were functional as of yesterday. All the rooftop units are not quite done yet. So they expect to be done by the end of the week. They'll do some post-testing and compare that to the pre-testing. We did send a calendar update, which included a lock-in of the mid-year in-service, which is really the semester break. So we're coming up on the middle of the semester between second semester and third, or second marking period and third marking period, the end of the semester. And you heard me reference vaccinations earlier. We have had great positive relationships with Allentown Health Bureau, St. Luke's University Health Network, and Lehigh Valley Health Network have all offered our school nurses as medical professionals and the nurses to go and get their vaccination under the tier 1 vaccination. So we sent all 3 offers out to them, whatever kind of worked for them, to be able to receive their vaccination for all 4 of our nurses. Our athletic trainers were also on the list in terms of medical professionals. We have had multiple conversations as late as even today with Lehigh Valley Health Network and put a notice out to our employees there. I believe for at least Lehigh Valley are going to run the applications for vaccinations through their My LVHN app. So we started to communicate to our employees to please start that sign up for the app, because they can go on, and then once they open up what is 1B, first frontline educational teachers, daycare workers, instructional assistants, people who have continuous contact with children, will be one of the first that get it in when they open up the 1B. Lehigh Valley Health Network, and I think St. Luke's has said the same thing. Every week they get a box of vaccinations, and it could be 10,000 or 12,000 vaccinations, and they are just working through the tiers. They do have to stick to the CDC tiering of risk groups. So obviously the first group is all of your medical professionals, your medical workers, your long-term care facilities. Then it goes into 1B, which is all of your emergency workers, police, EMS, your obviously teachers and daycare workers are in that group as well. Public transportation employees, some food service employees, and so they have it very defined, somewhat tied in most cases to your role that you play. And so we will be working with, I think, both of our networks who collaborate on an emergency council that Dr. Sosnovic and I sit on weekly to go through, and they will be asking us some for information and relaying some information to our employees about when that opens up for 1B. And from what I understand, as soon as they finish one tier, they're kind of teeing up the next tier. So as soon as the vaccinations come in, they are able to, roll out the next tier. So nurses, calendar update. Mr. Zimmerman is on, and I believe does also want to give you a brief update about winter sports and practices and things. But I will certainly be able to take any questions about COVID or Dr. Sosnovic sends an email regularly, so either one of us can field certainly any of the COVID questions or instructional model questions. Mr. Zimmerman.
Good evening, everyone. Just a couple brief updates. We had a brief hiatus, over the holiday season, let things simmer down a little bit, and we got back at it on Monday. So a lot of excitement in our building, but our fall drama, which was postponed, which is a good old-fashioned big family Christmas, we're going to try and live stream that this Friday at 7 and Saturday at 2. Kids will be wearing face coverings and performing. I just want to give folks a heads up. We had some cast members actually back out as late as today. And we have some shuffling of roles. So you might see some kids, some of our students with scripts. I left it up to them, and I said, quite honestly, I think everybody's going to be proud of you regardless. So we're going to move forward with that. Winter sports competitions start this Friday. Unfortunately, right now, spectators are still not permitted. For our senior night contest, we are going to try and get our senior parents to attend the ceremony in that contest. This is obviously in accordance with a strong recommendation from Lehigh Valley Health Network. The Colonial League as a whole also adopted this procedure, and we are hopeful as the situation improves, we can, in the 10% capacity limitations are relieved a little bit. We can look at getting some of our, at least our parents, into our contest, at least our home parents, for that matter. But all of our games. Every sport, every level will be live streamed on our YouTube channel. All just safety wise, just rest assured, all of our players, our wrestlers, and our coaches have been great. They've been compliant. They have been and will continue to wear masks, face coverings at all times. And it stinks, but even while competing, they've been getting used to that, and they've been very compliant with that. Again, that's another league-wide situation, so we won't be competing against anybody that does not have a mask on. A lot of other things have happened. We're limiting locker room use if at all possible. Visiting teams are coming dressed. For my wrestling fans in the room, we used to do the shoulder-to-shoulder weigh-ins. That's relieved for this year. We're going to weigh in as a team in the locker room to keep those pods separate as much as possible. We have mask timeouts being provided, so things of that nature. So we're taking it in stride. We're continually looking at it and working with our healthcare partners and trying to provide a safe avenue for these competitions. That's basically all I have to report. I just want to give you guys a little bit of an FYI upcoming event.
I'll certainly take any questions the board might have about, return back or numbers. The holiday break was helpful. It did reset all of our numbers, and so there's that 14-day kind of rolling average rolling numbers in each building that we've been kind of calculating for. Snowstorm, super helpful. I kind of teased, we were having some difficulty in terms of staffing and numbers. So the snowstorm, as long as it, 2 days, but it was super helpful right before the holiday. The one time you can be glad for a snowstorm or a snow day, good old fashioned snow day. But hopefully, we are able to continue through the month with very little or minimal interruption. But they do anticipate at least up until the middle of January to be at least community-wide, some difficult times with some positive cases. So we'll see how much that impacts us or not. We've had very good, I mean, Jason mentioned the masks with the voice cameras with the students. Kids have been fantastic. They've been very, very compliant. They have recognized that I think that it keeps them safe, it keeps them in school. And, you know, there's some high school kids that want to be in school more than you would have ever thought they wanted to be in school, that are really happy to be here and are really happy to be playing and are really happy to do whatever they need to do to make that happen. And, you know, our faculty have been great in terms of trying to reinforce that and keep people 6 feet apart. We've had good fortune with contact tracing when Dr. Sosnovic unfortunately has to make the phone call, or one of our principals has to make the phone call to say so-and-so is positive. Please tell me who he or she was around within 6 feet in the last 2 days. It's been very, very minimal because of our spacing and our hybrid, whereas we haven't had to have a lot of folks, whether they be kids or staff, go into quarantine as a result of a situation here. We've had plenty in quarantine as a result of situations elsewhere, which are a little out of our control, but do certainly have an impact in our instructional models here. Any questions from any of the board members, or if Dr. Sosnovic would like to add anything that I might have missed COVID related?
No, just any questions?
From a sort of planning out the second half, any ideas at this point of what's going to happen with, I noticed one of the local schools, I wish I could remember which one, announced they were canceling finals. They might have announced it today. I forget, it might have been Southern Wire or Saucon or somebody.
I did not hear that. I'm sure Mrs. Yadish is up on that. I did not see that. Mrs. Yadish has made some, I believe, accommodations with the high school teachers about end of quarter assessments. I don't know that it's a complete blanket of not finals, but they have, I think, communicated to students, but I can probably get that information from her before the end of the meeting. I didn't hear about a local district in terms of finalizing out the semester.
The gather was to allow them additional time to cover materials as opposed to prepping and review. So it was in order to cover the materials, they're eliminating what probably would be a period of reminders and regurgitation at the end of the semester. So any other implications on PSAT or PSSAs, any of the other standardized?
Well, Mrs. Yadish started to schedule, or has been in the beginning process of scheduling Keystones. So Keystones will be scheduled up. And so we did that out through, I think, February 12th, if my memory serves. So she will be one of them that will have to schedule the Keystones. The interesting part will probably be more PSSAs. So if you think of Keystones, they're very subject specific. So it's a little easier to grab the group of students that might have to take it, whereas PSSAs is a whole grade level. And how do you manage the timelines given by the state when students are in and out? I mean, there are equally school districts in the Valley and Commonwealth that are completely remote and they're not able to be administered that way. And so I think there will be continued challenges. There has been information or request about will they have to be administered, because last year they did not administer them. All they right now have done is they don't have to be included in the same way into evaluations as they were. But they haven't made necessarily the accommodation. So like I said, Mrs. Jadish is starting with the Keystone. Now they did make the accommodation for graduation requirements, as you heard her mention in the last update, but she will start to do the administration of those. I don't know the districts you're talking about, but my bet is that if they are a district that either has had a lot of delays or a lot of non-synchronous instruction, they might not have gotten through the content in the same way we have, and might not be at the place where they can administer a cumulative exam at this time in a course.
Easton.
Oh, it was Easton. I will message Mrs. Jefferson and see if she has any additional information. She's probably up on that, although Easton's out of our IU. But, and I will ask her to get an update for you at the board meeting. She will be here so that she can probably more adequately answer that question.
Any other questions before we move on?
Just a comment, Mr. Delaker. When I think back to last August, it seemed utterly implausible to me that we would be where we are as a school district in January and to have seen the level of success in maintaining program that has occurred. So I just I hope that everybody got to take a deep breath over the holiday and get ready for what's coming. But I think the work that's been done by the administration, the staff up to this point has been really amazing. And I just want to offer congratulations to everybody for what they've accomplished.
Thank you, that's appreciated. It's a logistical puzzle some days that we have to figure out to the goal of trying to stay in school and trying to provide the best education in the safest way we can. I mean, we have 400 employees or something, and we teased. I had a conversation with someone today and said, everyone's role is different. It looks different than it ever did any other year, but we're all pulling in the same direction for the same purpose. And so I think that's kind of what's helped us be successful. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Warfel. Well said. And I think we all sitting around the table agree 100% with that. The effort that we've seen from our staff and our faculty and our families and kids trying to get through this mess we're in. And thank you. As much as I hate standardized tests or dislike standardized testing, I'm glad we're doing it this year because I think it's going to show the success that we've had compared to the other schools in the education program that we have here at Northwestern. I'm really looking forward to seeing those results. Like I say, I don't really like standardized testing, but I think that's going to show us at the top of the heap when it comes to the education that we've been delivering here, as was mentioned earlier. And kudos to Art and his people for getting that air system done in our HVAC units all over the district. And that's amazing. That's done already. And it's too bad we can't have the kids take some of that air home with them. We have a safe building, but once you get outside of here, that's where the problems start. Good job for that too. Okay, anything else before we move into new business? Or any new business from the board or the administrators? Hearing no new business, at this time we offer courtesy to the floor once again. Is there anybody waiting to address the board? Seeing none. Okay. And before we adjourn, I want to announce that we will have an executive session immediately following this meeting. And we'll have to log out and log back in again, correct?
Yes, I said that. All right.
Okay. So we'll see you in a few minutes on our executive Zoom session. Motion to adjourn. Motion by Mr. Leiser, second by Mr. Ritz. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.
Wait a second.